Hello, everybody. I'm rjcurrer, and welcome back to our live stream. Today, we're taking a break from the Let's Run Adventure series, and we're just going to chill out and build some Legos and talk TTRPGs. So, if you're here, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat as you have them. Otherwise, I got a list that folks all across my channels have sent me to sort of discuss and chat about while we build. First things first, let's get into the Lego set. All right, so we're building the limited edition Dungeons and Dragons Lego set for the 50th anniversary. The big one with the dragon, like you should. We're going to be building as much of that. It's a huge set, so we're going to be building as much of that today as we can in our time, or until we might go later if we get into a groove. Could be fun. But I want to also show you. There's like comes with like four of these instruction booklets, and they're just gorgeous. I mean, the front of it, like the whole front section, has got a whole bit on like the designers and the various creatures that are in here, and it's epic. It's gorgeous. This is such a cool thing. Um, and I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out on this because this set was a gift from my mom, whom I love. But fun fact, my dad taught me to play D&D back in the 90s when I was a little kid. He introduced me to it. And I was also really into Legos. And so I would get tons and tons of Legos for Christmas. And it got to a point where my mom would have to buy the same set for, she had to buy one set for me and then one set for my dad so that we could build them together so we wouldn't argue about it. So when she bought me this set, she actually bought a set for my dad too, which is super cool. So it's something we've been able to bond over, and I'm excited to finally get to build this with you guys. So without any further ado, let's follow step one and dump out the bag. So hopefully that's not too god awful loud. All right. Lego noises. Woo. All right. Cool. So let's push all that over to the side. So we've got a clean space to build here. Get our little lever tool out and kick off from there. All right. So first we're going to build our little dwarf guy. I say little dwarf guy, but they actually have both masculine presenting, and feminine presenting options in here, which is super cool, I think. I love when they give you an option of your minifigs. So let's dump that out there. Looks like we need pieces from in here too. You can tell I'm super organized when I build Legos. Yeah. Nope. It's chaos. Live in chaos. When I was in the Peace Corps, the very first thing they told us is that if you were going to succeed, you needed to get comfortable having no idea what the hell you were doing. And I think I really took that to heart. I'm just going to dive into things. All right. So let's get him built. Let's find his beard. All right. And get him the face that they have two faces on here. They got the regular one. So you can see that. That's probably too close to focus on. And they got one where he's a little messed up. Yeah. We're gonna do a little black eye. We're gonna do the one without the black eye to start. He's gonna start off no damage. Give him his little hair. Okay. And build him his, I guess it's supposed to be a holy symbol, I suppose. Guess he's a cleric. Guess that makes sense. Dwarven cleric is kind of like a classic, which is funny because in like the original D&D, they like in first edition basic, there was no distinction between class or race. Like elf was its own thing, so was dwarf. Oh, looks like we got our first question. Awesome. So would you port the gold for XP old school / Shadowdark mechanic into a typical 5e campaign and the carousing or rights mechanic instead of the typical murder hobo paradigm. Yeah, actually, I totally would. It depends on the kind of campaign that you want to build, that you want to run, right? Like so, players are going to do what you incentivize them to do, right? So if you incentivize them to, go out and slay monsters, and that's how they level up, and that's how they get more power, then that's what they're going to go do. They're going to go do the murder hobo thing. Um, if you incentivize them with XP for gold, or using the carousing mechanic or both, then you're going to incentivize them. I mean, that you're going to get them to go look for gold, which is going to create a very specific kind of campaign, one that's a more treasure hunter sort of setup, which could be very cool if that's what you want to do. Um, Personally, I sometimes I will use that mechanic. Other times I'll use the milestone because I tend to be sort of an objective oriented. Like I want them to set objectives and pursue those objectives and not just go, okay, this is I'm going to make more gold if I go over here, or I'm going to get XP for slaying this monster over here. So I'm going to kind of deviate from my stated plan. And so I tend to use that milestone system personally, but that's just because that's what I'm trying to incentivize. So great question, Jonathan. Thank you so much for that. Um, Speaking of other questions, um, one of the questions that I got from other channels is when do NPC choices become railroading, and what's the difference between plotting and railroading, which really kind of come down to the same thing here, right? The question is, you're the DM, you're making decisions on behalf of the NPCs, and you're also creating this story around your players. At what point do the decisions that you make, when do they veer from reasonable, the sorts of things that the characters, the NPCs might do, and then when do they become railroady? When do they become a problem? Well, I think that all comes down to whether you're reacting to what um, your player characters are doing, or whether you're reacting to the story that you've sort of pre-generated, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with plotting. I don't care what anybody says. There's absolutely nothing wrong with coming up with plot points for your adventure, knowing that, you're going to discard a fair number of them. As long as you're willing to accept that, there's nothing wrong with doing that. In fact, I do it all the time. It's very helpful. It gives you something, it gives you a skeleton from which to deviate. Um, and and that's useful. That is so valuable because you never end up in a place where you're just like, well, I don't know what we're gonna do next. I don't know what's gonna happen. Um, you know, well, you never end up that way in a bad way, right? And so, uh, you know, as long as you're reacting to what your characters are doing, as long as the decisions that you're making are based off of the decisions that they made, then you're not railroading, you're responding. The example that I gave when I was initially asked this question, and I promised I would expand on it a little bit, was that this is multitasking like this is harder than I thought. Um, is Was it at the end of at the end of the adventure we've been making for the Let's Write Adventure in our live stream here, you know, I had made sort of an offhanded comment about that, even if the players, even the characters decide to bug out of town after turning over the cold iron, that that the Bloodgood sisters might still come after them. Well, what I meant by that wasn't so much that no matter what they do, the Bloodgood sisters are going to come after them. I meant more of if they somehow failed to inspire the town, if they tried to inspire the town to rise up against the Bloodgood sisters, and then departed, having failed that, then the hags might come after them because they've established themselves as opposition. They have made a decision that makes them a potential threat to the sisters, and that's something that they can't necessarily allow to pass, right? And so in that case, it's not railroading. However, if you were to do something like the players show up, they hear, they find out that the town's going to turn over the cold iron to these hags, and they just go, yeah, I'm cool with that, whatever. And they walk away, and you still have the hags come after them. Yeah, okay, that is railroading. That's you adhering to the story that you have in your mind over what the decisions the players have actually made. Um, cool. All right, so let's make a little progress on this, and then we'll get into our next question. Um, so, cool. All right. I like that this little tavern is going to be on the water. I did not realize that when I was looking at the front of the box set, which, I mean, now that I'm aware of it, it's pretty obvious. I don't know how I missed it, but uh, but I still really like it. I think it's a cool detail. So let's see. All right, let's move that up a bit so you can see that a little better. I'm not being super great about keeping that in frame. Well, okay. All these little fiddly pieces. Um, and the artistry that goes into designing Lego sets astounds me. My brain just doesn't think like this. And so I find it just incredibly impressive that people do, that anyone could. All right, so now that we're past those first little fiddly bits, um, let's talk about. Oh, the next question is kind of similar to what we had just been discussing. That is, should you ever plot your campaign? Because there are a lot of schools of thought out there and a lot of channels that talk about, never, ever, 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 whatever you do, do not plot a D&D adventure. Do not plot your TTRPG. You hear a lot of stuff about how, that ruins reactive play and yada, yada, yada. And I fundamentally disagree with that. So long as you're willing to discard your plot points. And that's the caveat that I'll put in that, is that just because you make something doesn't mean that's what gets played, right? I routinely plot adventures, and again, it's a place from which to deviate, right? It means that I don't have to spend as much time trying to think on my feet when I sit down to the table. I already have ideas for what might unfold. And the key to that is I don't think in terms of a series of events when I do my plotting. I try to think of, or I should say, try to think more in the context of scenes, interaction points, encounters that could occur that I think are likely to occur. Because why am I going to waste my time making things that I don't think have a snowball's chance of ever occurring? And so I find it incredibly helpful to kind of plot these things out. And I mean, I've even gone to the point where in my friend group campaign, I will, when I plot it out, I'll use like straight up story structure, like the Dan Harmon circle structure that's based off of the whole, writer's journey bit, the hero's journey from, Joseph Campbell and folklore and yada, yada, yada. Not because those things have to happen, but because it gives me a place to go. It gives me a place to work from. And it's a lot easier to have something to work with and deviate from that and adapt from that than it is to go in with absolutely nothing and just improv your way through it. And I think it makes for a better story too. At least I think it makes me a better storyteller when I do that. Different techniques, different tools for everybody, but you should use the ones that work for you regardless of what people like me on the internet tell you. Cool. All right. So let's. Oh, I suppose I should follow like the actual instructions while I'm doing this, instead of just kind of putting things where I think they should go. Oh no, our door. Oh, I'm dropping stuff. I'm responding to where the fall of our little dwarf friend here. We don't want him to fall over. Let's put him out of the way. Okay, cool. All right, and let's get our little window here, which clearly gets a little grating in there. Cool. And put that on backwards, obviously. All right. And cool. Cool. All right. So, okay. Let's see. Let's get this on here. Awesome. All right. So while we're doing that next bit, oh, I've got a sticker to apply. Let me get that on, and I'll start answering more questions here, because I am going to mess up this sticker otherwise. But they have like a whole little sheet of them, and one of them's a little bulletin board, and that's what we're about to do. And I like the detailing about like the lost cat on there and everything. I love when people put this kind of like detail and stuff. All right, got that in. Put that up and out of the way. Cool. All right, so next question. What's the most important thing to know about your NPCs? What's the most important thing to know about your NPCs? That is a little bit of a loaded question. Um, and that's because, the answer is really the thing that makes you understand them, right? Um, if you're, which really comes down to sort of how you yourself think, how do you process information? You hear stories about writers who were like, I didn't really understand the character, and then I figured out that he wore this particular jacket, and then I knew everything that I needed to know about him. And if that's you, despite my funny voice on that, that's great. Like, you know, I've kind of said this before, but like Andy Serkis, which I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Talked about when he was doing the voices for the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit audiobooks, and he does unique voices for all of them. That he, um, he had particular sort of postures and body positions that he put himself in to help sort of very quickly get into those characters. And if that helps you, then that's the most important thing to know. For me personally, um, I think the most important thing for you to know about your characters is their core belief structure, right? What is the thing that they believe? Or the things that they believe. And I don't just mean like in general, because everybody has lots of beliefs about lots of things. I mean like the thing that defines them. What is the thing that they would risk life and limb for? And if you can't come up with anything about it, if there's nothing they care enough about that they would risk their life for, then that means their life, their own life, is the thing that's most important to them. And that's a valuable thing to know, because these give you, that sort of stuff gives you guide rails on, what your characters are willing and aren't willing to do. What lengths will they go to achieve their objectives? Because I mean, they have objectives, they have goals, they have things that they want from these interactions with the characters. Even if you're not entirely sure what those are at the moment, right? Like if they random NPC that you didn't even think about, shows up because the characters decided to go, you know, off script as they are wont to do, um, and as they should do sometimes. Um, even if you don't know what it is, they want something. As Kurt Vonnegut put it at one point, he said that you've got to give your characters. Anyway, he was talking about writing, but it applies to this. But he says, you got to give your characters something they want in every scene, even if it's just a glass of water. And so they all want something, but what are they willing to do to get it? How far are they willing to go? You hear examples about, talking about explaining social interactions, and they say things like, oh, there's rails on here because, the characters aren't going to be able to persuade the farmer to, leave his farm and come help them on their adventure. Well, maybe they can. I think it really depends on what that farmer really believes in and what's at stake, you know? And so knowing that belief structure, knowing what do they care about more than life itself is really, I think, what sets, um, what helps me understand a character, really makes them feel distinct from um, just any any other NPC that I might field during an adventure. Okay. Okay, I got another little bit here. It's going to take some paying attention to nicely because there is a direction for this particular door for it to go in. I think I've got it. Okay. Let's put the handle on the outside here. I think I'm picking the right piece for that. Ooh, I missed like a whole bunch of stuff. That's what I get trying to talk here. Okay. That's all right. That's what we're here for. Okay. So we've got a whole bunch of little connection base plate pieces to put in here. That's what I was missing while I did this. Okay. All right. Cool. All right. See if you have any other questions. Please feel free to toss those in the chat while we work on this. Okay. Okay. Little working on, you can see like these little bits here, and there's a whole other section that we're kind of building out right there. All right. Okay. And then we're almost ready for the door. Okay. Okay, get the door on there, and then the little fitting piece right there. Cool. All right. Does it swing open? It does. Huzzah. All right, let's build a fireplace and let's talk about another question here. So, what do we got? We got okay. Where do your ideas come from? And / how can I find ideas for my own games? Common question that I get a lot, because my brain works in odd loops. But the fact of the matter is that it really comes down to inspiration, right? Like where do you find the inspiration for your own adventures, and where do you go when the kind of the tap has run dry, if you will, because that will happen from time to time. You will have these bursts of inspiration, and then you'll go through sort of these valleys where you don't feel terribly inspired, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. That is a natural part of the creative process. And so I combat that by carrying around a little notebook with me, a little memo book. I mean, it's a tiny little guy. Um, and You could do the same thing on your cell phone. I got plenty of people who use their notes app for this, and you just write down ideas as they come to you. The good, the bad, the indifferent, all of the um, all of the ideas as you find them. You don't judge them. If they appear to you, you write them down. No matter what form they come in, whether they're vague or really concrete, and you just keep that list and you sit on it. You don't try to, you know, race home and do something with it all the time. I mean, you just let that list live there and you let that grow and you let it matriculate through your head, and it's going to warp and change and become something else, and that's good. It's going to evolve. You don't know how many adventure ideas I have found that I was like, oh, this is brilliant. And then I sat down and write it. I'm like, this is not good at all. Um, and I ended up having to change it and making it, twist into something else that was much better than my original idea. But you keep that list because you never know when you're going to need a new idea, and you never know where that's going to come from. But they're going to come to you they're going to come to you in odd moments. Agatha Christie talked a lot about how like the best time to like plan a book was while she was doing the dishes. Brandon Sanderson talks about, he goes for walks, right? Or he just, takes a break and he'll go play video games or something. Like, it's just you do something that doesn't require a lot of um, brain power. Like it's just kind of you're doing something that's automatic. You don't have to think about it. You let your mind wander, um, and you let it kind of go to those places for those ideas that you've had that you've written down, and you're still kind of kind of cooking on. Um, and yeah, you'll let it work, and you'll find that the ideas just kind of come to you. It's a far more organic process than I think most people really want it to be. I think most folks would really prefer if creativity was just a tap you could turn on, and it's not. It's a slow drip that you've got to let build up, and so you need a basin for it to to build into that pool that you can pull from as you need to. Um, to that end, there's like I said, writer's block, and we've got another question on here on how I handle writer's block and derailments. So I'm going to kind of fold that in to this one, and that that's a very there's a lot of ways to do that, right? Because you got to think of creativity like your mana, right, or your spell slots, or your you know health bar, or whatever, however you want to conceptualize it. But it is a it is a finite but replenishable pool, and when you draw on it heavily for you know over short periods of time, you know you can deplete that reservoir, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's sometimes you want to drain the tub and put fresh water in it, right? Um, to kind of get new ideas flowing, but it can be scary and it can be frustrating, especially when you need ideas because you've got a new session coming up, or you're starting a new campaign, and um, you're trying to create something on a timeline. Um, and so, what you can do, and or I should say, what I do, what I find to be super helpful for me personally, and you're gonna have to find what works best for you, is I take a step back from what I'm doing, what I'm working on, what I'm trying to kind of force, and I focus on just one, either going and getting outside, doing something that is kind of that's it's kind of rote, like I hike, like I like to go hiking. That's one of the things that I'll do. That I don't have to put a lot of thought into it. I can again let my mind wander, but specifically outside. And if you don't live in an area where you can go hiking, like the hiking part is not the vital bit. Getting outside and into life and just kind of letting life wash over you is a good way to to get past that block. If you're in the city, go for a walk, go walk around. Listen to people, sit down at cafes, just listen to people talk, be a freaking eavesdropper. Like, just listen to those conversations, look for those little oddball comments that kind of jump through, um, and just take them on board. If something sticks out to you, jot it down, write it down. It's incredibly useful to have that, like, just that life, that humanity washing over you, just nature kind of rushing by you and helping to refill your cup. The other thing that you can do, and this is something else that I find to be particularly helpful, and that is you can sort of lose yourself in other kinds of media. People will tell you that the TTRPGs are not like any other kind of media. They're not books, they're not movies, they're not TV shows, and they're not wrong in that assessment. They aren't. They are their own thing, as they should be. However, that doesn't mean that you can't find inspiration from those other things. But what I would caution you against if you do that, because you is to be very selective about. I'll show you what we've done so far here. Be very selective about what media you consume while you're doing that, because you are going to be, while you're in that state, like while you're looking for ideas, because you're going to be very influenced by what you watch, what you read, whether you think you are or not. Right? You're either going to be so opposed to making anything like that, or you're going to want to make something that's cool like that. Um, and so, if you don't want to create something that's just a carbon copy of what somebody else has done, like for example, I wouldn't recommend going and watching Lord of the Rings if you're trying to figure out your next D&D campaign, right? Um, you know, I wouldn't necessarily go watch Ocean's 11 if you're trying to figure out your next Shadowdark, your next Blades in the Dark campaign, that kind of thing. Because, those are so similar. I would go watch and read things that are different genres from what you're working on. Like, you know, I will frequently go and watch, like, spy thrillers or westerns, or stuff like that, or even comedies. If I'm feeling depleted, um, or like I'm like rewatching Dexter right now because that's kind of helping me sort of refill my cup, because that I'm not going to run, a Dexter campaign in D&D, but it's a very different kind of character. It's very different than everything that I've been working on, which means that it's getting me to think in ways that I haven't been thinking in recently. Um, and that is really the crux of all this, I think, is that, your brain is, well, I mean, it's neural tissue. It's not a muscle, but it your mind works very much like a muscle in many ways, and um, so having getting it to stretch parts of itself that it hasn't had to recently is a really good way to rediscover things that you hadn't really thought about in the recent past. It's a really good way to get yourself out of a funk and to, um, yeah, to discover something new, to refill your creative cup, as it were. Cool. So, I think, huzzah, we are done with that section. Um, let's uh, let's put our little guy on the dock here for the moment, and we will put our extras to the side, and we will start building section 2. Because this is a multi-part build, but check this bad boy out. Very cool, huh? Yeah. I like that. A little in there, little fireplace, little bulletin board next to, chair in the corner. Yeah. Cool stuff. I think that's pretty rad. All right. So, let's put it to the side, though, because I'm sure we're going to come back to it later. And let's open baggie 2. And collect my scissors. Okay. Put this spare plastic off to the side here. Cool. And time to build a new minifig. This one is one of my favorite classes, the Wizard. First D&D character I ever played was first edition basic D&D, very much like Shadowdark, by the way. Very, very much like Shadowdark, which I think makes Shadowdark something that is quite appealing in my mind because it feels very nostalgic, but also has some nice updates to the rule set for that. But my very first character was Wizard, and I have never quite gotten over how much I like them. All right. Let's again read the directions, Rob. Or RJ, I guess. Okay. And there. Okay, and the ears are part of the hair. I love it. I love it. Okay. Such a cool one. Such a cool one, right? Ah, awesome. Awesome, awesome. All right. There is a scepter for our female presenting wizard. So let's build that scepter or wand, I guess. Feels more like I think it's probably supposed to be a wand. It feels more like a scepter, though. I mean, look at it. little jewel on the top of that. Very scepter-like. All right, we got a spill book. And, ooh, another decal for that spill book. So let's find the pieces and parts in here. Among my calamity. Okay. Put that there. Okay. Put that here. And then it has me putting this one on the cover. Yeah, number 7. Okay. Cool. Put that in her hand. And voila, we have our wizard. Very cool. All right. Okay. She's a little bit top heavy though with this book. Tell you what. Okay. So let's get started on the rest. Oh, looks like there's other spells we could put in there too. That's cool. That's good to know. And oh, we are building off of what we already have. Okay, sweet. I thought we were going to build a whole new segment and then add it on. All right, so as we build that, let's get into another question here. Oh, this one's a pretty straightforward one. And that is, do I play any other RPGs or TTRPGs? The answer is, yeah, I do. I talk a lot about D&D. D&D is hands down my favorite. I mean, I don't think I've made any bones about that. You know, I've been playing it for a long time. Like 30 years at this point, right? So long time. I've been DMing 5e since late 2014, early 2015, something like that. Came out in 2014, right? I think so. Yeah. So, so about 10 years at this point. And so I truly love D&D. I think it is just an absolute ton of fun, but I also believe that there's a lot of value in other TTRPGs. You know, I find that when I am faced with a challenge that I'm trying to, trying to tackle in D&D, that playing other TTRPGs is a really good way to kind of find solutions, find mechanics or ways of approaching a problem that I hadn't really considered before. So for example, I really wanted to do more. I wanted to do more mysteries in my home games of D&D, and so but I was really kind of struggling with that because there's a lot of there was a lot of bits and pieces out there about how to do mysteries, and a lot of advice, and some of it was good, and some of it I thought was just just utter nonsense. And so I decided that I was gonna find a TTRPG that really focused on mysteries, and Call of Cthulhu was the obviously recommended one. And so I got the starter set and I set it up and I played a game with my friends and we had a good time. And I enjoy Call of Cthulhu. I think it's a cool rule set. I don't like it as much as I like D&D. I certainly don't like DMing it as much as I like D&D. but I like the horror mystery aspect of it, and I like how they run like mysteries in terms of finding clues, because they just get rid of the mechanics, right? They make it very simple in the idea that if the clue is vital for the player to move forward in the story, then if they look in the right place, they just find it. There's no roll, there's no, they put no randomness into that. The characters just find what they need so long as they go looking in a place where they could find it. And there's a beautiful simplicity to that, that I really, really value. Um, and I started doing that in my own campaigns. And then the other thing they do is that you will notice if you played Call of Cthulhu that yes, there are some checks to find clues, but those are always clues that give you extra information that put you a step ahead. And so they put those little bonus bits of information behind the wall of dice rolls, which I think is a really cool way of doing that. So I started adopting it, and it's been it's worked just so well, so well in my home games that I could never think to go back to doing it a different way with D&D. It's so good. It just making it easy for the characters to find what they need, so that they never end up in a situation where they they just don't have the info to move on. You know. Um, and let's see. There we go. That snaps in like that. Um, I will tell you what, though. I really, really want to try Shadowdark. I have DM'd one game of it, and yes, it's proved as lethal as everybody says it is. Um, but I would really like to play some more Shadowdark, and I'd really like to get to be a player in a Shadowdark uh, campaign at some point. That's something uh, that I would really look forward to. Um, I just, you know, I it's so reminiscent of first edition, where I kind of cut my teeth that can't tell if that's gold or okay, transparent. I think it's supposed to be gold. Um, where I first learned D&D, that I just think it would be so much fun, so much fun to play. Okay, let's get that on here. And now we're getting a little signpost in there. If you can kind of see that. Yeah. Cool. So that's attached, and now let's get some roof elements in here. We've got more of these, which goes here. And then this. Goes there. Cool. All right. Let's get into another question here, because we've got, what, 10 minutes left? All right. Ooh, this was a good one that I got. As a new DM, should I split my campaign into smaller sections with each with their own problems? And so the root of that was, I was talking to somebody who was a new DM. They were building their very first campaign. And they wanted to know if they should make it a little more episodic, if they should split it up into chunks, so that they had a discrete kind of unit to deal with, as opposed to trying to cover the whole, uh, you know, a whole rambling campaign or one that kind of extends and goes on and on and on and on. Like Curse of Strahd, which is a terrific campaign. Don't get me wrong, but it is a lot of moving pieces for a new DM to juggle. Um, and my answer to that is yes. I think you should chop it up. As a if you were running your first campaign, if this is the first time you are stepping out in the world as a DM, I would even recommend running a one shot before you run a full campaign. You know, there's no reason to make it harder on yourself. And it's easy to run a series of one shots and turn them into a campaign by just having those be the adventures that the party goes on, right? And I mean that's still a lot of fun, right? That's nobody's going to have a bad time with that, and it's just easier to kind of take those bite-sized pieces, run them, understand them well, um, and craft a good story for your characters because you're not having to think about, what is down road. And the same advice is true, I think, if you are writing your very first campaign. Writing an episodic campaign is a great way to get started because again, it's a lot harder to kind of paint yourself into a corner with what you've written and what you've created if you're doing it as discrete chunks. One of the biggest mistakes that I see new DMs try to make, and that is that they really try to do these heavily, woven campaigns where they are, laying down information in the first level adventure that's not going to become relevant until the characters are fifth or sixth level, or they're really trying to create this world that is so layered and so, don't get me wrong, gorgeously done, but it's just a lot when you're first starting out. It's a lot of things to juggle and to try to do. Um, so instead of focusing in on trying to lay tracks for adventures to come, uh, especially ones that are way down the road, and trying to weave this very complicated narrative, focus on a smaller bite and just do it really, really well. Um, I think that frankly that's your fastest, route to success. Um, in if you're starting out as a DM, and early success as a new DM is so important, right? You need to be running adventures where your characters are having a good time that make you feel like you did a good job. Um, you need that. You need that in the beginning because you don't get a lot of positive reinforcement as a DM. You'll get a quick, hey, that was good at the end of an adventure for the most, or at the end of a session for the most part, but you don't get a ton of feedback. And when you're starting something new, when you're learning a new skill, you need a lot of that positive reinforcement because that's what's going to keep you going on, going to keep you pushing and learning and growing and get you to a place where you're comfortable taking risks and getting hard feedback later on. It's all of that is so important to your development as a DM. So don't make it harder on yourself. Start small, start easy. If you are going to be running an adventure for the very first time and you've never, ever, 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 ever run one, I've heard advice out there that you should start by writing your own because then you don't have to memorize as much. I disagree with that because writing an adventure is a different skill than running an adventure, and it's a lot harder to learn how to run an adventure if you're also learning how to write an adventure. So, what I would say to that is pick a pre-published one, and that's a bite-sized chunk like Ghost of Saltmarsh or Tales from the Yawning Portal. Those are pretty good ones. I'd say of the two, um, Ghost of Saltmarsh, the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh is effectively two adventures that they have sandwiched together, and it makes a beautiful two little bite-sized chunks. that are so easy to run. Um, that I would recommend. It's one of the ones I'd recommend starting with if you've never run an adventure before. It's a really good place to start. They give you lots of really good tools in there. And then once you've got some adventures under your belt, once you feel comfortable running campaigns or or one shots or what have you, then give it a go writing one. I encourage anybody who wants to write a campaign to write a campaign. I would just set yourself up for success before you do that. Cool. All right, so let's make a little more progress in our Lego set here before we close up our section. So we've got these little vent covers here, and we've got this here. Okay. But yeah, so I have a question for you. Anybody who's watching this now and watching this later, if I was to do a series on learning to DM, would that be of interest to you? Because I know we've got a lot of forever DMs in the audience, and so I don't want to speak down to anybody, especially anybody who has already got a lot of experience DMing. But if I did one that was kind of like a master class kind of series on how to DM as a video series on here, would you guys value that? Was that something you guys would be interested in checking out? If so, yeah, let me know in the comments, because if that's what you want, I will do it. That being said, if you have other video ideas, if you've got other things that you'd like me to talk about that I haven't touched on yet, let me know in the comments on that too. I read all of the comments. I try to respond to all of them if I can. But I am, I'm interested in hearing what it is that you guys want to know. I'm happy to give you the benefit of my experience, however much benefit that is. All right. So I'll take any advice on how to pick apart a published adventure, how to present it, how to modify it for the world you envision, etc., plus any other advice you might have. Dope. Yeah, I would happily do that for you. I will do a more in-depth video on that, but in the spirit of us, being here and being able to talk about that right now, Jonathan, um, the advice that I would initially give, just sort of like the soundbite advice for this, would be to approach a published adventure like we have in the live stream here, where we've created this sort of template, and we're pulling pieces and we're putting them in place, right? Like, so you don't have to write anything new for this published adventure, but I go through and I find all of the key NPCs and I pull them out and I put them in a document and I write my notes for how I'm going to play them using the NPC template, and the stat block, and I put all that in there. I don't worry about fleshing out the adventure part because that's already pre-written, but I'll go in and I'll make a block. I'll make notes for a section for the settings. For example, I am running a Ghost of Saltmarsh campaign right now with some of my friends, and I went through and I wrote out notes to myself about Saltmarsh in there, like the actual location. I went through and I outlined the factions and I came up with what they want and what they're trying to accomplish. And I did all those little clocks. And I will do a video where I kind of break down my template for that and really talk about how I pick that apart. Because really, it's just taking it piece by piece and approaching it the same way that we do when we're making our Let's Write Adventure video. It just goes a lot faster because you don't have to create anything or create as much from whole cloth when you do that. But yeah, thank you for that. I will absolutely create a video on that, Jonathan. Thank you for the idea. Cool. As far as other advice I have, yeah, I promise to give you guys that whether you want it or not. So, yeah, I will take all that on board. Thank you. All right, so let's see. We're kind of hitting our time here, but I really want to get this section done. So let me see if I can get this knocked out. I will be honest with you, building this set is a ton of fun, and I am not going to promise that I won't work on it without you guys. Um, it's I'm really enjoying this, and there's a lot to it. Um, and I don't think that we're going to have I'm not sure you guys have enough questions for me yet uh, to fill the number of live streams this would take to get this thing put together in its entirety. But we'll jump back into it at a later date as well. And maybe I'll wait to build the dragon, and we'll do that as a Q&A as well, if that sounds cool to you guys. So, yeah, I guess let's go ahead and put a pause here. We've kind of got our the beginnings of our tavern first floor set up here, you know, and yeah, and I'm sure next time I see you guys, I will have the tavern completely built. So thank you so much. Thank you for joining me, and thank you to everybody who submitted their comments, both in the chat here today and then previously. Their questions and yeah, what you're burning to know. So thank you so much for watching. As always, if you've enjoyed this live stream, please subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that bell icon so that you never miss a video. And if you want to come see how I actually run these games, come join me on startplaying.games/GM/rjcurrer. I'd love to actually get to play a game of D&D and Shadowdark. I'm running one Shadowdark campaign on there at the moment to get a chance to play with you all. So thank you so much, and I will see you all next week.